Elsa's morning didn't start with coffee. She was in complete disarray because she held her husband's phone in her hands. Just a few minutes ago, when the phone rang, she grabbed it to turn off the alarm. But when she saw a message from his lover, she was simply shocked. She stared at a photo of a naked girl who was writing some vile things to her husband. She couldn't believe that this was happening right now. She woke up in an instant and couldn't come to her senses, looking at the photograph and then shifting her gaze to her husband, who entered the bedroom. Seeing her wild eyes, he immediately understood what she had seen there and, snatching the phone from her hands, immediately glared at her with a hostile look. He left, and she remained in the bedroom alone, struck by the fact that her husband was cheating on her. Their relationship couldn't be called perfect, but she hoped that he would have the strength to bring their relationship back to normal. To start taking some action at least. She had always looked for faults in herself. And even now, when her husband was simply toying with another girl, she thought that she was to blame somewhere deep down inside and understood that the fault was not hers at all. The next time he entered the bedroom, an unpleasant conversation started immediately. "Why are you even looking at my phone? I've told you 1,000 times, my phone is my phone. Don't you dare touch it," Joseph said. He looked angry, his eyes filled with blood, he was trembling. It was obvious that he was struggling to contain his anger. "I thought it was the alarm clock. I picked up my phone and there was a message." "Yeah, and how dare you make me feel guilty? You're cheating on me, you've got some fake girls sending you sexy pictures. You keep blaming me? Don't you think that's a bit much?" She wondered, still looking at Joseph, who was furious. And his expression was as if she had betrayed him, not the other way around. "There was no need for you to grab hold of it in your filthy hands. Since you got yourself into this mess, you'll have to face the consequences on your own. Go on, gather your things so I never have to see you again. We'll divorce tomorrow, and then I hope I never see you again at all. Do you understand me? Come on, I said pack your things." Joseph shouted, immediately tearing her belongings out of the closet. Elsa, still not understanding what had triggered such a violent reaction, stared at her husband. It was as though he hated her. Now she could see just how intense his hatred toward her was. She had thought that despite their far from perfect relationship, they were still a married couple. Loving spouses who could weather any storm together. She had believed that even now, when he could have started apologizing or come up with 1,000 excuses, he was simply shouting at her and throwing her things. In general, everything he did was building a wall of hatred between them. But when he started physically throwing her belongings, when he grabbed her and dragged her into the living room by her hair, she was completely bewildered. All she managed to do out of fear was toss a few items and essentials into her backpack, throw it over her shoulder, change her clothes, and rush out onto the street. He yelled from the balcony for her not to come back, threatening to burn all her belongings. And he said that all she had to look forward to now was some sewer, because she wouldn't be able to earn a living for herself. Elsa, who couldn't understand what had happened, sometimes glanced back, looking at his angry face, which even from here appeared red. The morning that was supposed to be quite calm and ordinary had turned into a real nightmare. And now she was just watching it all happen. It seemed to her that she wasn't present in the event, just an observer. Only when he rushed out onto the street again did she want to escape. "Stop, you fool. Let's file for divorce right now," he said, still approaching her. "If you take one more step, I'll run away," she screamed, clearly losing her composure. He used to be quite temperamental, but for some reason, now it seemed to her that his anger was unnatural. It was as if he had completely snapped. She couldn't find any justification for such behavior, especially now that she was completely helpless. He stopped and raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. She nodded and followed him. If he had decided to end everything so abruptly, it meant he definitely had a lover. Despite having seen her pictures, she didn't know how serious their relationship was. But since he had decided to leave so suddenly, it meant he wanted to be with her, and apparently, these thoughts had been brewing in his mind for a while. Joseph probably thought he would handle things his own way. Apparently, he had some kind of plan in his head. But his plan was not meant to succeed. And don't show off there. If you arrange some kind of concert, I'll get back at you. Joseph said. Calm down. If you lay a finger on me, I'll get back at you too. In public, I'll definitely be able to prove that you touched me, she retorted. He immediately walked ahead, glancing at her. Apparently, he didn't want to discuss it. He wanted to see only his own superiority, ignoring her pleas. They did, indeed, file for divorce. Now, she found herself on the street, still carrying the backpack on her back, realizing that she was completely destitute. She had been fired from her job just 4 days ago. She had nowhere to live. The divorce papers had been filed. All she had were a few $1,000s rolled up tightly. And what could she do with that money? She couldn't even afford to rent a room, let alone an apartment. Now she didn't know what to do, and her only option was to turn to her sister for help, even though she knew that Madison wouldn't lend her a hand. Elsa walked down the street where nothing had changed. Everything was just as it had always been. Somewhere in the distance, there was a beautiful large church, and mothers with their children were strolling along the streets. There were more of them here, as just around the corner was the biggest children's center. Some were taking their little ones to sports activities, others for entertainment, but they all looked tired for some reason, while the children consistently appeared joyful. Elsa wished she could look joyful too, but her prospects were utterly bleak. She could openly admit that she was now destitute. All she could manage was to buy herself a loaf of bread, some water, and try to make that money last for a few weeks until it ran out completely. In the new city, she had no friends, and she had no parents. There was really no one to turn to. She only had her sister, but Madison had a difficult personality. She had never really treated Elsa as a sister, and it wouldn't be surprising if she simply kicked her out without offering any help. As Elsa walked near the church, she tossed a coin to a homeless person. "Darling, why are you giving me money?" "It's clear that you're in need yourself," the homeless man said, looking at her with sympathy. "Will it change anything?" "I no longer have a home, no family. Soon, I won't even have a husband. I'm going to my sister, and I know that she'll probably kick me out. At best, she'll allow me to sleep in the backyard. Giving you $10 or $20 won't change anything. You know what? Keep it," she said, handing him a few bills that were folded. She had about $50 in her pocket, and she gave all of it to the homeless man. "You can at least buy yourself some food and water, but there's no point in me buying anything anymore. Because nothing good awaits me," she added. "You have a kind heart. It's a pity that those with kind hearts suffer more in our world. You know, dear, if I manage to do everything as I want, if I can make it home, you'll never regret giving me this money," the old man said, smiling at her. She smiled back, nodded, wished him luck, and then continued walking towards the residential area. An hour later, she found herself in the very sector she was headed to. But now she was scanning the area for her sister's house. When she arrived, she knocked on the gate several times. The gate, which quivered with every touch, jingled when Elsa knocked. But no one answered, and she stood there by the gate. A large car that pulled up to the gate immediately looked familiar to her. "What are you doing here?" Madison asked when she saw her sister standing at the gate. I don't understand. Why did you come here? My husband kicked me out of the house. I have no money, no job. I need a place to stay for at least a week while I look for work. I need your help. I have nowhere else to turn. Elsa pleaded, but she could see in Madison's eyes that she was not inclined to help her at all. Madison parked her car in the yard but didn't allow Elsa inside. Instead, she stepped out onto the street and stood by the gate, crossing her arms. She looked as if she was about to escort her sister out, to make sure she never returned. I told you that if you're old enough to get married, then you're old enough to handle your own problems, Madison said, recalling their last conversation. I'm not obligated to let you into my home. In fact, I don't even want you in my home. Fine, since you have nowhere else to go, sleep in the shed over there. But make sure I don't even see you near the house. Madison, who looked utterly distraught, was starting to resemble Elsa's husband more and more. She quickly went from being upset to furious, and her eyes filled with anger. She began to tremble, just like her spouse, and her anger flared up much like his. Elsa understood that Madison couldn't help herself. She simply hated Elsa, as she always had. From their early childhood, it had been a pattern that Madison couldn't stand her sister and only loved their brother, who had passed away. And now, with their brother gone, there was no one to mediate between the two sisters. She led Elsa into the yard, pointed toward the shed, and went back into the house. She immediately grabbed the phone and started calling someone to complain. Elsa, standing by the shed, suddenly looked at the large house where her sister lived with a sense of longing. Couldn't she have allowed her to at least spend the night in the living room? Yes, even somewhere, anywhere, that would be somewhat acceptable to live in, rather than the shed. She sat in the shed, where it was dirty and dusty. Fat spiders sat in the corners on dense cobwebs, seemingly eyeing her greedily. Elsa had a terrible fear of spiders, and being alone with them like this was very frightening. When another car pulled up to the gate, Elsa didn't go out. She knew it was Evan and that he probably wouldn't take her side. Because Evan, regardless of how difficult the situation was, always sided with his wife. Half an hour passed, and when the door of the shed opened and Evan walked in, she flinched. She stepped back because she didn't immediately recognize him, as the light coming from behind him obscured his face. He waved his hand, and she understood that he came with friendly intentions. However, something inside her still told her to be cautious. "Let's go. I'll take you to an apartment." "Your sister, of course, is quite something," he said sharply. "If it had been your brother who came to me, I would have let him into the house without hesitation. I would have fed him and let him stay as long as he wanted. I have an apartment in the city that I used to rent out, but now there's no one to rent it to because the last tenants almost destroyed the entire place. I've fixed it up, but I'm not letting anyone in there for now. So, you'll stay there for a while." She thanked him and obediently followed him to the car, where she sat and looked out the window, catching a glimpse of her sister standing with her arms crossed over her chest. She knew that Madison was furious right now. Most likely, she was cursing her own sister for accepting help from her husband. Elsa herself couldn't understand why Madison had treated her this way. She had already outgrown the period when they constantly clashed. After their brother's death and the loss of their mother, they should have been closer, supporting each other. But that's not how it turned out. Elsa was willing to forgive Madison for everything, but nothing seemed to change. Madison was so deeply immersed in her anger that Elsa realized trying to reconcile with her would be futile. "When I found out what she had told me, I was stunned. She's completely lost her mind lately. I've noticed before that she has some quirks, but it seems to have gotten worse over time," Evan said, gazing straight ahead. Elsa understood that he just needed to vent, as it seemed he couldn't tell anyone except Madison's sister. Elsa herself had suspected that Madison might have some mental issues because sometimes her reactions were far from normal and she would behave irrationally. I want to divorce her. I can't stand her constant tantrums and her constant nitpicking anymore. Our entire life has turned into a never-ending cycle where I revolve around her and she takes advantage of it. Do you think she'll take this news well? Elsa asked, looking at Evan. He shrugged. If she sent her own sister to live in the shed, I won't be surprised if she attacks me with something. In reality, I want to have a calm conversation with her. I'll explain that it's time for us to divorce, that our marriage, unfortunately, hasn't worked out. But I'll leave her the house, I'll leave her with enough money to last her for a few months, and then she can figure things out on her own. It all started with her demanding a child. I told her from the very beginning, even before signing this contract, that we'd discuss having kids once the contract is over, which is in 2 or 3 years. She knew what she was getting into. But now it's as if she's forgotten all of that. Every day when I come home, she starts a scene. And every time I come home, she tears me apart with her verbal rodeo. Anyway, I won't burden you with this anymore. Madison has always been strange, Elsa said. She only loved our brother. She treated our mother terribly. And when our brother died, she completely lost it. So, it's not surprising at all. Anyway, thank you for giving me a roof over my head. I was starting to think I'd end up on the streets. He nodded, shook her hand firmly, wished her luck, and said that she could comfortably stay in the apartment for the next few months. He assured her that if he needed the apartment back, he would give her plenty of notice and help her find new accommodation if necessary. She was genuinely grateful to him. A stranger had helped her get back on her feet, at least to have a roof over her head. She realized that he was helping her because they both found themselves in difficult situations. These situations were indirectly related to Madison. Elsa entered a simple, cozy one-bedroom apartment and immediately felt warmth and comfort. She watched Evan's car as it drove away. She thought that sooner or later he would tell Madison about the divorce, and most likely she would have a meltdown. Elsa knew it was better to break the news in a public place to prevent Madison from causing any damage at home. It was bitter for Elsa to realize that her own sister had left her on the streets and made her spend the night in a terrible shed. Now that she was in the apartment, she felt like life was starting to stabilize. But how could it be stable? She had no job. She promised herself that tomorrow she would distribute her resume and maybe try working from home. The next morning, as soon as she woke up, she went to various companies, having only had her morning coffee. Everywhere, they told her they would definitely call back, and by evening, she realized that nothing would change, no one would call her, no one would invite her to work. She couldn't understand why employers would say they would call back at all. If the applicant was not suitable, they should have said so right away so that the applicant could look for another place. But no, each time they gave hope and then didn't call back. However, when Elsa came home, she couldn't believe her eyes when she saw a presidential motorcade outside her window. The large, beautiful black cars, gleaming in the light of the street lamps, seemed unreal. She stared at them, thinking they looked like enormous black oily drops. When a rather large, broad-shouldered man got out of one of the cars and headed toward her, she immediately stepped back. She stared at him, ready to run, not understanding what he wanted. Seeing that she was scared, he raised his palms in a conciliatory gesture. "Are you Elsa?" the man asked, looking at her. "Do you remember that homeless man to whom you gave money at the church? You spoke to him for a while and said that your life was falling apart and that the money wouldn't change anything in your life. Do you remember?" "Yes, I remember," Elsa said. "But what does this have to do with what's happening?" Directly related, the man replied with a smirk. You helped the father of a well-known oligarch get home. Now he wants to thank you. I hope you will pull yourself together, get in the car, and come with us. Is there a female driver among you? Elsa asked, not wanting to ride in the car with the men. She understood that she had nothing to lose in essence, but still wanted to protect herself somehow. The man nodded, and then a delicate woman got out of another car, waved to Elsa, and got into the car. The entire presidential motorcade then set off, and Elsa, barely able to take in her surroundings, saw that they were leaving the city and heading towards a cottage settlement that had been built relatively recently. She was afraid, her legs trembling, but the girl behind the wheel continued to reassure her that everything was fine and nothing bad would happen. They just wanted to thank her in person. Elsa got out of the car, looked at the huge luxurious house that now stood in front of her, and thought that someone was very lucky to live in such lavish conditions. She herself, of course, would not choose to live in such opulence, even if she had the money, but she would certainly find a way to put those resources to good use. She was escorted into the house, and she followed, discreetly glancing around, trying not to stare too much. But she was very eager to look at all the decorations here. She had even studied art, and subconsciously, as if on autopilot, she was examining everything around her from an aesthetic point of view. If the courtyard appealed to her, the ostentatiously decorated living room, created with the principle of expensive and lavish, did not appeal to her at all. She sat down in an armchair. She was told to wait, and so she waited. Logs crackled in the fireplace. The fire, which barely rose from the logs, looked mesmerizing. A tall wrought iron screen that now stood in front of the fireplace seemed to be protecting it from a dog that roamed around the living room. An old, almost gray Labrador, apparently with poor eyesight. It approached Elsa, sniffed her hand, and, after she petted it, immediately triggered a wave of affection from her. She sat down, placed her head on Elsa's lap, and Elsa continued to pet it. You old rascal! Found yourself a new owner? Chuckled the portly man as he entered the living room. When she looked at him, she recognized him immediately. She could hardly believe now that she had saved his father. He laughed, and the dog, nodding its head, headed in the direction of the sound, occasionally bumping into objects. She's already very old, and it will be so sad when she's gone. I'm even scared to think about how I'll cope with it. It's strange, I have money, it seems like my father has resurfaced too. But still, there's no one closer to me than my dog. It's a pity that they don't live as long as we do. I would give half of my life for her to have that half, so we could spend our entire lives together. But fate seems to have decided to take away years from me without sharing them with my pet, Elsa said, her voice filled with emotion. I always wanted a dog, but my parents didn't allow it at first. Then I was studying and didn't have time, and then I got married, and my husband was strictly against it. So, I never ended up getting a dog, she continued. You know, I think we humans are unworthy of dogs. They're loyal to us, they'll never betray us, they love us no matter who we are with. I'm glad you mustered the courage to get in the car because I thought you wouldn't. I was even considering having to go myself. But as you can see, my health doesn't allow for long journeys. Sitting in a car is a real torture for me. I want to thank you for giving my father money. You see, my father suddenly decided that he didn't want to live on my dirty money and left home. I was too proud to look for him. I thought he had gone to the village. I had no idea he was begging somewhere in the city. As soon as you gave him money, he called a taxi and came to me because he couldn't walk there. So, we've reconciled, everything is fine between us. I want to thank you because without you, he wouldn't have survived this upcoming winter, the man said sincerely. She nodded, and a warm, pleasant silence settled in, far from being awkward. They simply sat in the living room, gazing at the fire, listening to the crackling of the fireplace. Occasionally, they glanced at the old Labrador, who now sat at her owner's feet, resting her muzzle on his legs. She would sometimes sigh heavily and then close her eyes, breathing peacefully and deeply. Her breathing became raspy, and Elsa, without a veterinary background, understood that the days of this beautiful dog were numbered. You know, when I heard that some poor girl had helped him, I didn't believe it at first. I grew up in an atmosphere where people are wolves to each other, and then in business, you know, everyone is ready to bite each other's throats. And when I later found information about you and learned a lot about you, I felt bitter. You've had quite a tough life. And now that I know the continuation of that life, I understand that you're probably unhappy, the man said. He fell silent again, then continued in a much calmer and peaceful tone. Life is a very strange thing. We can spend our entire lives rushing, searching for a haven, looking for any opportunities to earn money. When we make millions, we realize that happiness is not about money at all. And as they say, it's better to cry about a bad life in a Ferrari than in a shack. But I'll say it differently. It's better to be happy with an average income than to be rich and completely powerless against nature and diseases. Are you afflicted with an illness? She asked. Yes, it's hard to come to terms with having such a huge fortune and still not being able to help myself. All I've been doing in recent years is squandering my wealth. I'm leaving it all to new charitable foundations in my will. In the best case scenario, I have about 3 more months left. I'm immensely grateful that I'll be able to spend these 3 months with my father. And it's all thanks to you, he said. You're an artist, right? Well, I want to give you a gift. Move into the house that used to belong to my wife. Unfortunately, tragedy didn't allow her to stay in this house, but I'm sure she would be happy if a real artist lived in it. They'll take you there. Tomorrow we'll start processing the paperwork. I have another gift for you, one that will be another starting point for me to help those in need. Elsa was so overwhelmed by what she had heard that she didn't immediately realize that she had been given the house for free. She understood that for this man, the reunion with his father was much more important than any money or property. And apparently, this house meant nothing to him if he decided to simply give it to her. But he clearly hadn't finished speaking. His voice sounded heavy, and it was evident that speaking for so long was challenging for him. Unfortunately, wealthy people only seem to accumulate their wealth. Despite their wealth, they won't be able to spend it all in their lifetime. I'm very sorry that with such wealth, they refuse to help those who can't even earn 1,000th of it. Children and adults die just because they don't have enough money for medical treatment or surgeries. And all these wealthy individuals sit on their money, not thinking at all about those whose lives they could save. I want you to help me create another space that will help generate and distribute these funds to those in need. But for now, I apologize, it's getting difficult for me. I need to lie down. They will take you. His last sentences were a struggle, and he was breathing heavily. His breathing had become as raspy as that of the old Labrador. He gripped the armchair, slowly reached for the wall, started walking towards it, but then suddenly stopped. He beckoned a young man over, whispered something in his ear, and then turned to Elsa, smiling, apologizing that he would have to leave so soon. He said again that they would take her and then went upstairs. A tall man helped him ascend, supporting him by the elbow. Elsa imagined how difficult each step must be for him, especially knowing that nothing and no one could help him live even a couple of months longer than the most optimistic prognosis from the doctor had promised him. Elsa stepped out of the car and once again found herself in the same vehicle where the young woman had been sitting. When the young man approached them and pulled out a chocolate Labrador puppy from under his jacket, she was astonished. Mr. Martinez said the puppy should be given to you. He took her to ease the sadness of parting with Selena, but he had no idea about his illness back then. But it seems like his health is against him. Take her, she'll be just as wonderful as Selena. She's not her daughter, but believe me, she'll be a wonderful dog, the young man said, and Elsa could see tears glistening in his eyes. As they started moving, the woman driving the car remained silent. But as soon as they re-entered the city and turned into the residential area, she finally spoke up. Elsa noticed that everyone was finding it difficult to come to terms with the fact that the man was dying. It seemed that he was genuinely well regarded by all, and he had a good heart, considering how everyone was mourning the prospect of his imminent passing. It's such a shame that he's leaving. We can all see how he's getting worse and worse. He's afraid that as soon as he dies, his relatives will swoop in like vultures and take over his business and estate. I'm glad he gave you this house because I truly would be happy if someone good, talented, and kind lived in it, she said. Elsa got out of the car near her home when it was already dark outside. She held the fluffy puppy in her arms, and it alternated between licking her face and her hands. She held on to her newfound happiness, tears streaming down her face, because in one evening, her two biggest dreams had come true. She had a dog, and she had a big house, and she was truly happy. When she entered her home, she saw papers laid out, with all the dates indicated for when she needed to be at certain places to sign documents. She could hardly believe her luck. By the time she had divorced her husband, she was already the owner of a beautiful small house, which had now become her spacious workshop. The oligarch who gave her the house helped her realize her own dream, and she fully devoted herself to the project they had discussed. She was thrilled to work on it, especially with the assistance of someone who could manage it independently and support her. Joseph sat on the couch, drinking beer, and complained to his friend over the phone about how nothing was going well for him. He had lost his job, his young lover had found someone younger, and he was left with nothing. But when he suddenly saw a news report on TV, he immediately hung up the call. When his friend called him back, he ignored the call again. Joseph was left speechless, watching his ex-wife standing in front of a massive gallery. The young artist, millionaire, and well-known local philanthropist. Today, we celebrate the 6th opening of the Hope Galleries, where all the famous artists have gathered to exhibit their works. But today is a special event because the gallery owner herself has decided to showcase her art for the first time. Just a reminder, Hope Galleries, which have now expanded nationwide, take only half of the profits and donate exactly half to charitable centers that help people in difficult situations. They also hold charity auctions, with all the proceeds going to charitable funds. I would also like to remind you that thanks to these galleries, more than 100 people have received costly surgeries, dozens of children have been given a chance at life, and hundreds of people have managed to get back on their feet when they were at the lowest point of their lives, the host said. Then Elsa started talking about her galleries. She explained how one person had given her a chance at life, and now she wanted to give these chances to everyone in difficult situations. Joseph, who was watching this interview, was in such shock. What was happening? Elsa continued speaking. He still couldn't understand, clutching his head. He grabbed his jacket and rushed to that very gallery. However, when he arrived, he was not allowed inside. When Elsa came out, he was standing at the entrance, fidgeting and pacing back and forth. She recognized him with some difficulty because he had changed so much. He was heavily bearded, and his overall appearance made it seem like he had been in an unfavorable condition. She knew he no longer had a job, but she couldn't understand why he had come here in the first place. "And why are you here?" Do you want to ruin my life again? She asked, looking at him completely indifferent. And what did you expect? Did you think that when I saw the news report, I would just stay at home, watching you amass millions? Did you manage to marry some old rich guy? He said jealously, and she could see envy in his eyes. I wasn't married. I will never get married again. I received financial support from someone I helped, just like I helped his father. Now I'm involved in charity, helping those who, like me once, found themselves in a very tough situation. If you're in a tough situation too, go to a charitable center and wait your turn, she replied. She had already started walking towards her car, and Joseph, in a fit of desperation, rushed towards her, blocking her path. She looked at him with surprise, not understanding what more he wanted. She had no intention of explaining everything that had happened to him, and frankly, she wasn't interested in why he was in such a state. When you left, my whole life fell apart. My lover found herself another man, younger and richer. I lost my job, and now I'm just barely making ends meet. I had to sell my apartment just to pay off debts and loans, he said, staring at her. So, what do you want now? Do you need money? Here, take some money, she said mechanically, taking several large bills from her wallet and handing them to her ex-husband. I didn't leave you. You kicked me out when I found out you were cheating on me. Stop blaming everyone around you for the troubles in your life. Everything that happens in your life is simply the result of your decisions. She got into her expensive car and drove away. Joseph was left standing there, clutching the crumpled bills in his hand. He watched her expensive car drive away and thought about how he had treated her so cruelly, and it was no wonder she was responding in kind. She drove home, no longer thinking about her ex-husband because she was no longer interested in him. She was focused on the upcoming art exhibition and the need to visit another city to find a new manager for the soon-to-open gallery. Late in the evening, she sat in her armchair, trying to establish contact with the new candidate she was scouting for her gallery via her tablet. The young dog, who had grown a bit since the day she adopted him, was playing with another puppy of the same breed, only with a different coat color. The two Labradors, one black and one chocolate, frolicked on the carpet. She watched their playfulness, occasionally distracted from her work. She thought that this was true happiness. She had a home, a wonderful job, the opportunity to help other people, and she had the dog she had always dreamed of. She was happy, planning to open an animal shelter in the future, and was grateful for the chance to completely transform her life. She aimed to shape her life exactly as she had always wanted, without relying on the opinion of a man who was now worth nothing to her.